Marcus freezes in the hallway. Through the crack in the door, he sees her comforting a crying boy, calling herself Mommy. But she told him she couldn't have children. Then the boy turns around, and Marcus sees his own blue-green eyes staring back at him. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you're watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The champagne tasted bitter on Marcus Whitmore's tongue, though the bottle had cost more than most people earned in a week. He set the crystal flute down on the polished mahogany bar of the Rosewood Club and forced a smile at the man across from him, another board member whose name he'd already forgotten. The conversation had drifted, as it always did at these networking events, toward personal life. The question came with a knowing grin. "So, Marcus, when are you going to settle down?" "A man in your position needs a family," Marcus laughed, the sound practiced and easy. "I'm focused on the company right now. Besides, I have standards. I don't date single mothers." The words came out sharper than he intended, but he didn't take them back. He'd said it before, at other gatherings, other business dinners. It was his line, his boundary. Women with children came with complications, with ex-husbands or baby daddy drama, with divided attention and responsibilities that would always come before him. He'd worked too hard building Whitmore Industries from his father's struggling manufacturing company into a tech empire to waste time on complicated relationships. The other board members chuckled, understanding. They were men like him, men who'd married young, had their children, and now enjoyed the freedom of divorce settlements and weekend custody. Marcus was 42 and had never been married. He dated occasionally, women who understood the arrangement, who didn't push for more than elegant dinners and weekend trips to his villa in Turks and Caicos. It was a good life, uncomplicated. He excused himself from the conversation and moved toward the club's terrace, needing air. The Boston skyline stretched before him, lights glittering against the October darkness. His phone buzzed in his pocket. His assistant, probably, with some crisis that couldn't wait until morning. But when he pulled it out, he saw his mother's name. "Mother," he answered, stepping further into the shadows of the terrace. "Marcus, darling, I need you to do something for me." Patricia Whitmore's voice carried that tone he knew meant she wouldn't accept no for an answer. "The museum gala is in 2 weeks, and I've arranged for you to escort someone." Marcus sighed. His mother had been trying to set him up for years, convinced that he needed a proper wife to solidify his position in Boston society. "Mother, we've discussed this. This is different. She's perfect for you. Dr. Simone Clark. She's the new head of pediatric cardiology at Massachusetts General. Beautiful, intelligent, accomplished. Her family owns Clark Pharmaceuticals, though she's made her own way in medicine. No drama, no complications." Something in the way his mother emphasized those last words caught his attention. "No children? Absolutely not. She's 34, never married, completely focused on her career. Rather like you, actually." Patricia paused. "I met her at the hospital benefit last month. You'll like her, Marcus. Just one dinner, at the gala. If there's no connection, I'll stop meddling." That last part was a lie, but Marcus found himself agreeing anyway. One dinner couldn't hurt, and his mother was right about one thing. He did need a date for the museum gala. Going alone meant enduring pitying looks and another round of introductions to suitable women his mother's friends had dug up. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the marble lobby of the Museum of Fine Arts, adjusting his bow tie and trying not to check his watch. He'd arrived early, a habit from business that served him poorly in social situations. The gala wouldn't start for another 20 minutes, but already the space was filling with Boston's elite, diamonds glittering under crystal chandeliers. He saw her across the lobby before his mother could make introductions. Dr. Simone Clark moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, her deep brown skin luminous against a midnight blue gown that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. She wore her hair natural, a crown of tight curls that framed her face, and when she smiled at something an older woman said to her, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. His mother appeared at his elbow. "There she is. Come, I'll introduce you." But Simone had already spotted them. She excused herself from her conversation and glided over, her eyes meeting Marcus's with amused intelligence. "You must be Marcus." Your mother has told me absolutely nothing about you, which I appreciate. Makes this less awkward. Marcus laughed genuinely this time. She's told me you're perfect, which makes it much more awkward. Well, I'm not, Simone said, taking the champagne flute his mother pressed into her hand. But I'm excellent company at boring galas, and I promise not to let you stand alone looking uncomfortable. Patricia beamed and melted away into the crowd. Mission accomplished. Marcus found himself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Simone had a dry wit that matched his own, and she seemed genuinely unimpressed by his wealth or position. When he mentioned Whitmore Industries, she nodded politely, but seemed far more interested in discussing the new Caravaggio exhibit they'd come to celebrate. They drifted through the galleries together, champagne in hand, talking about art and medicine and the ridiculous price of Boston real estate. Marcus learned that Simone had grown up in Atlanta, the daughter of pharmaceutical royalty who'd expected her to join the family business. Instead, she'd gone to medical school, specializing in pediatric cardiology because she wanted to fix broken hearts literally, rather than metaphorically. My father didn't speak to me for a year, she admitted as they stood before a Renaissance portrait. He thought I was throwing away my future. Now he brags about me at every board meeting. Parents, Marcus said, and they shared an understanding look. It wasn't until dinner that he realized how much he was enjoying himself. He'd been seated next to Simone, whether by his mother's design or coincidence he didn't know, and their conversation flowed easily through courses of seared scallops and beef Wellington. She asked intelligent questions about his business without being obsequious. She challenged his opinions on healthcare policy without being combative. She made him laugh. When the dinner ended and the dancing began, Marcus surprised himself by asking her to dance. He hated dancing, usually avoided it at all costs. But with Simone in his arms, moving to some classic standard he couldn't name, it felt natural. Your mother is watching us, Simone murmured, her breath warm against his ear. Let her watch, Marcus replied, and felt Simone's quiet laugh against his shoulder. They left the gala together, Marcus offering to drive her home. She accepted, sliding into his Tesla with the ease of someone comfortable in expensive spaces. Her townhouse was in Beacon Hill, a beautifully restored brownstone with gas lamps flanking the entrance. I had a wonderful time, Simone said as he walked her to the door. Much better than I expected, to be honest. Your mother made it sound like a blind date with a stuffy businessman. I am a stuffy businessman, Marcus said. You're really not. She smiled up at him, and he wanted to kiss her but held back. Too soon. Would you like to have dinner? Actual dinner, not a gala. Somewhere we can talk without your mother watching. Yes, Marcus said, the word coming out before he'd fully processed the question. Tomorrow? I have surgery tomorrow, Saturday. They made plans. Saturday became Sunday brunch, then Tuesday dinner at a small Italian place in the North End, then drinks on Thursday at a rooftop bar where they watched the sun set over the Charles River. Marcus found himself checking his phone between meetings, smiling at Simone's texts, messages about difficult surgeries and amusing hospital politics, about the book she was reading, and the restaurant she wanted to try. His mother was delighted, naturally, already planning their wedding in her mind. Marcus's friends were more skeptical. She's probably after your money, his college roommate Jeremy warned over scotch at their usual bar. Or she wants babies. Women her age, the clock is ticking. Marcus hadn't thought about children. He didn't want them, had never wanted them, but somehow the topic never came up with Simone. They talked about everything else, their childhoods and their ambitions, their fears and frustrations. But children remained an unspoken subject floating between them. It was 6 weeks into their relationship when Marcus finally addressed it directly. They were at his penthouse overlooking the harbor. After a long dinner he'd cooked himself, something he rarely did but enjoyed doing for her. Simone was curled on his couch, barefoot, her head on his shoulder. It felt domestic in a way that usually made him uncomfortable. But with her, it felt right. Can I ask you something? He said into the comfortable silence. Always. Do you want children? Simone was quiet for a long moment. He felt her breathing change, could sense her choosing her words carefully. That's complicated, she finally said. I don't, Marcus said, deciding honesty was best. I never have. I'm not good with kids, and I don't want to bring someone into this world who'd grow up with a father who resents them. Better to be clear about it up front. Another silence. Longer this time. Then Simone turned to look at him, her dark eyes unreadable. And if I said I did want them, would that be a deal breaker? Marcus's chest tightened. He didn't want to lose her, but he'd been clear about his boundaries his whole life. I think it would have to be. I'm sorry, but I need to be honest. I appreciate that, Simone said softly. She sat up, pulling away from him, and Marcus felt the loss of her warmth like a physical thing. I need to be honest with you too. I don't think I can have children. There was an accident when I was in my 20s. Internal injuries. The doctors said pregnancy would be extremely high risk, possibly fatal. I've made peace with it. Relief flooded through Marcus, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved. I'm sorry, he said, reaching for her hand. That must have been difficult. It was. But it's also freed me in a way. I can focus on my career, on my patience, on building the life I want without that particular pressure. She squeezed his hand. So if you're asking whether children are a deal breaker, the answer is no. They're not on the table anyway. They made love that night with a new intensity, a sense of having crossed some invisible threshold. Afterward, lying in Marcus's bed with the city lights painting shadows across the ceiling, Simone whispered, I'm falling in love with you. Marcus pulled her closer. I'm already there. The relationship deepened through winter. Marcus introduced Simone to his business associates, who were impressed by her intelligence and poise. She fit seamlessly into his world, comfortable at charity dinners and corporate events, never overshadowed, but never pushing herself forward. His mother was already calling her daughter and making pointed comments about engagement rings. It was March when Marcus realized he wanted to marry her. They'd been together for 5 months, longer than any relationship he'd had since college, and instead of feeling trapped, he felt settled. Simone understood him, understood the demands of his work, understood his need for space and his carefully constructed life. She had her own career, her own passions, her own friends. They complemented each other perfectly. He bought the ring in April, a 3-carat diamond in a platinum setting, classic and elegant like Simone herself. He planned the proposal for 2 weeks, arranging a weekend trip to his villa in Turks and Caicos, the place he went when he needed to escape Boston winters and corporate pressures. They arrived on a Friday evening, the Caribbean air warm and salt-touched after Boston's late spring chill. Simone had never been to the villa before, and Marcus enjoyed watching her explore the space, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking turquoise water, the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. This is incredible, she breathed, standing on the terrace as the sun set in impossible shades of orange and pink. How do you ever leave? It's easier when there's nothing waiting for me in Boston, Marcus said, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Now I have a reason to be there. She leaned back against him, and they stood together watching the sun sink into the ocean. Marcus felt the ring box in his pocket, heavy with promise and possibility, but the moment didn't feel right. Too obvious, too expected. He wanted something more meaningful. The next morning, he suggested a boat trip. The villa came with a small yacht, and Marcus had arranged for a captain to take them to a secluded cove he knew, a place where sea turtles nested, and the water was so clear you could see 30 feet down. They spent the morning swimming and snorkeling, Simone exclaiming over tropical fish and coral formations like a child on Christmas morning. Marcus had never seen her so unguarded, so purely happy. They ate lunch on the boat, grilled fish and fresh fruit, and afterward Simone dozed on the sun deck while Marcus sat beside her, watching her sleep. She looked younger in sleep, the careful control she usually maintained slipping away to reveal something softer underneath. He wanted to spend the rest of his life watching her sleep, protecting her dreams, building a future together. He woke her gently as the boat returned to the villa's private dock. Come for a walk with me, he said, and she smiled sleepily and took his hand. They walked along the beach as the sun began its evening descent, their feet leaving prints in sand that would be washed away by morning tide. Marcus had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but now the words felt inadequate. How do you tell someone they've become essential to your existence? How do you promise forever, when forever felt like such an impossible concept? They stopped at a natural alcove in the rocks, a place where the beach curved inward, and bougainvillea grew wild over stone. The water lapped gently at their feet, warm as bathwater. "Simone," Marcus began, then stopped, his carefully prepared speech evaporating. He pulled the ring box from his pocket instead. "I've spent my whole life building walls, protecting myself from complications and mess and anything that might threaten the control I've fought so hard to maintain. And then I met you, and suddenly all those walls seemed pointless. You make me want to be braver. You make me want to build something that lasts." He opened the box. The diamond caught the setting sun, throwing rainbow light across Simone's face. "I know we haven't been together long, but I'm 42 years old, and I know what I want. I want you. I want every morning to start with you next to me, and every evening to end the same way. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like. Will you marry me?" Simone's eyes filled with tears. For a terrible moment, Marcus thought she would say no, that he'd misread everything, that his mother had been wrong and this perfect woman was about to walk away. Then she laughed, a sound caught between sob and joy, and threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," she said into his shoulder. "Yes, Marcus, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and they stood there in the alcove kissing while the sun set behind them, and waves broke against rocks that had stood for millennia. Marcus felt something in his chest loosen, some tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. They spent the rest of the weekend making plans. A small wedding, they decided. Intimate rather than the society spectacle Marcus's mother would want. Simone's parents would fly in from Atlanta. Marcus's small circle of close friends would be invited, and they'd have the ceremony at the villa, this place that now held the memory of their engagement. They flew back to Boston on Sunday night, Simone's hand in his, the ring on her finger catching light as she turned it absently. She seemed quieter than usual, and Marcus attributed it to the emotional intensity of the weekend. He felt it too, the weight of what they'd promised each other, the future spreading out before them full of possibility and risk. His mother was ecstatic when they told her Monday evening. Patricia practically screamed with joy, immediately pulling out her phone to start making calls. "I knew it," she kept saying. "I knew from the moment I met her." "Oh, Marcus, I'm so happy for you." Simone smiled and accepted his mother's embrace, but Marcus noticed a tightness around her eyes he didn't recognize. That night, at her townhouse, he asked if she was okay. "I'm wonderful," she said, but there was something forced in her voice. "Just overwhelmed. It's a big step. If you're having second thoughts, I'm not." She kissed him, hard and desperate. "I love you. I want this. I just need time to process everything." They set the wedding date for October, 6 months away. Simone threw herself into work with renewed intensity, picking up extra shifts and taking on more complicated cases. Marcus told himself it was normal, that she was establishing herself at the hospital before taking time off for their honeymoon. But something had shifted since the proposal, some subtle change he couldn't quite identify. It was June when Marcus's world began to crack. He'd stopped by Simone's townhouse unexpectedly, planning to surprise her with dinner reservations at her favorite restaurant. She'd said she was working late, but he'd confirmed with the hospital that her shift ended at 6. He wanted to do something romantic, something to recapture the magic of their engagement weekend. He let himself in with the key she'd given him months earlier, and heard voices from upstairs. Not the TV, actual conversation. Simone's voice, and another younger voice. A child's voice. Marcus froze at the bottom of the stairs, his heart suddenly pounding. She'd said she couldn't have children. She'd said it wasn't on the table. But there was definitely a child in her house, and she'd never mentioned babysitting or having family visit. He should have announced himself, should have called out, but something kept him silent. He moved up the stairs quietly, following the sound of voices to a bedroom he'd never entered before. The door was slightly ajar, and through it he could see Simone sitting on a twin bed, her arms around a boy who looked to be about 7 or 8 years old. The boy was crying, and Simone was making soothing sounds, rocking him gently. "It's okay, baby," she murmured. "I know it's hard, but it's just a few more months, I promise. Then everything will be different." "But I want to live with you now," the boy sobbed. "I hate being at Grandma's." "She doesn't understand." "I know, sweetheart. I know. But Mommy's working very hard to make things right. Soon we'll be together all the time, and you'll love our new house, and everything will be perfect." Marcus felt the world tilt. Mommy. She'd called herself Mommy. Simone had a son. Dr. Simone Clark, the woman he'd asked to marry him, the woman who'd told him she couldn't have children, had a son she'd hidden from him for 8 months. He must have made a sound, some sharp intake of breath or movement that betrayed his presence, because Simone's head snapped up. Her eyes met his through the crack in the door, and he watched the color drain from her face. The boy turned too, his tear-stained face curious and afraid. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Simone carefully disentangled herself from the boy, whispering something Marcus couldn't hear before standing and walking to the door. She stepped into the hallway, closing the bedroom door behind her. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "I can explain." But Marcus was already backing away, his mind racing, his chest tight with betrayal and confusion. "You have a son," he said, and his voice came out strangled. "You told me you couldn't have children. I said I couldn't have them, not that I didn't have one. There's a difference. That's semantics, and you know it." Marcus felt rage building, hot and righteous. "You lied to me. For 8 months, you lied to me." "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you everything." "There's a difference." Simone reached for him, but he stepped back. "Please, let me explain. It's complicated. I told you on our 6th week together that I don't date single mothers. I was explicit about that. And you said nothing. You let me propose to you. You said yes." Marcus laughed, the sound bitter. "God, how stupid am I?" "What was the plan, Simone? Spring it on me after the wedding." "No. Marcus, please, just listen." "I don't want to listen. I want to know why. Why would you do this?" He was aware that he was raising his voice, that the boy in the bedroom could probably hear everything. But he couldn't stop. "I trusted you. I gave you everything, and you've been lying to me this entire time." "I wasn't lying," Simone said, and now there were tears streaming down her face. "I was protecting him, protecting both of us. You don't understand the situation. Then help me understand. Tell me why you hid your son from me." The bedroom door opened. The boy stood there, small and frightened, his eyes red from crying. Marcus got his first clear look at him and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The boy had light brown skin, lighter than Simone's, and his features were a blend of her elegance and something else. Something Marcus couldn't quite place. But it was his eyes that made Marcus's breath catch. They were blue-green, an unusual color, pale against his skin. Marcus had blue-green eyes. His father had blue-green eyes. It was a Whitmore family trait, distinctive and rare. "Mommy?" the boy said in a small voice. "Who was that man?" Simone knelt beside him, her hands shaking as she smoothed his hair. "This is Marcus, baby. He's a friend of Mommy's. Everything's okay, but everything wasn't okay." Marcus stared at the boy, at those impossible eyes, and did rapid math in his head. The child looked 7, maybe 8. 9 years ago, Marcus had been in Atlanta for a tech conference. He'd gone to a bar alone one night, tired of networking and corporate small talk. There'd been a woman there, beautiful and sharp-tongued, a medical student on break from studying for boards. They'd talked for hours, then gone back to his hotel. She'd left before dawn, and he'd never seen her again. He hadn't even gotten her last name. But he remembered her face. He remembered the way she'd laughed, the intelligence in her eyes, the natural halo of her hair. He remembered thinking she was too good for a one-night stand with a businessman passing through town. "Simone," he said slowly, the word barely audible. "How old is your son?" She closed her eyes, and he knew before she said it, Knew from the way her shoulders collapsed. Knew from those impossible blue-green eyes staring at him from a face that was half Simone's and half his own genetic history. "He's 8, Simone whispered, opening her eyes to meet Marcus's stare. He turned 8 in March. Marcus did the math again, counting backward, his hands trembling. March, 9 months from that June night in Atlanta. 9 months from the conference where he'd met a medical student whose last name he'd never learned because they'd been too busy talking about everything else, about philosophy and ambition and the weight of family expectations. He'd woken up alone in his hotel room with her scent still on the pillows and a note that said only, "Thank you for an extraordinary night." Is he mine? The question came out raw, barely more than a whisper. The boy, his son, their son, looked between them with growing confusion and fear. Simone's face crumpled, and she pulled the child against her, her hand cradling his head. "Marcus, please, not like this. Not in front of him. Answer the question." "Yes." The word was so quiet Marcus almost didn't hear it. "Yes, he's yours." The hallway seemed to tilt. Marcus grabbed the wall for support, his breath coming in short gasps. He had a son. For 8 years, he'd had a son, and he'd known nothing about it. 8 years of birthdays and first days of school, of scraped knees and lost teeth, of bedtime stories and Saturday mornings. 8 years of a life he should have been part of. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you find me?" "I tried," Simone said, and her voice cracked. "God, Marcus, I tried. I only knew your first name, and that you worked in tech. Do you know how many Marcuses work in technology in Boston? I called every company I could find, left messages that went nowhere. I searched social media before I gave up on it. But you were traveling for business, and I was in medical school, and then I was pregnant and alone, and by the time I realized I couldn't find you, I'd already decided to keep him anyway." The boy started crying again, overwhelmed by the tension he couldn't understand. "Mommy, I'm scared." "Why is the man angry?" Simone's face transformed, all the fear and guilt melting into pure maternal protection. "He's not angry at you, baby. Never at you. Why don't you go back to your room and play with your Legos? Mommy needs to talk to Marcus for a few minutes." "Is he going to make you cry?" The question landed like a physical blow. Marcus looked at this child, this small person who was genetically half him, and saw fear in those familiar eyes. His eyes. The boy was afraid of him, afraid that he would hurt his mother. And wasn't that exactly what Marcus had been doing? Shouting in a hallway while a child listened, making accusations without asking for the full story. "No," Marcus said, forcing his voice to gentleness he didn't feel. "I'm not going to make your mother cry. I promise." The boy studied him with an intensity that reminded Marcus painfully of his own father. Then, apparently deciding Marcus could be trusted, he nodded and went back into his room, closing the door softly behind him. The click of the latch echoed in the sudden silence. Simone sagged against the wall, her carefully maintained composure finally shattering. Tears streamed down her face, and she wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold the pieces together. "I was going to tell you. I swear I was going to tell you. But then your mother introduced us, and I realized who you were. And you were saying all those things about not dating single mothers, about wanting someone uncomplicated. And I thought if I told you right away, you'd walk away before you knew me, before you could love me. So you lied. I omitted. There's a difference." "Stop saying that." Marcus's voice rose despite his promise to the boy. "Stop pretending there's some moral high ground here. You knew exactly what you were doing. You let me fall in love with you, let me propose to you, knowing the entire time that you had my son hidden away like some dirty secret. He's not a secret. He's my life. My entire world." Simone's voice turned fierce. "I've raised him alone for 8 years. Me. Not you. Not his grandparents. Not anyone else. I worked my way through medical school with a baby at home. I did my residency on 3 hours of sleep because he had night terrors. I learned to braid hair and cook meals that a picky eater would actually eat. I held him through every fever, every nightmare, every moment of his life that mattered. So don't you dare act like I was hiding him out of shame. I was protecting him from rejection. Rejection? I didn't even know he existed. How could I reject someone I didn't know about? You rejected the concept of him every time you said you didn't want children. Every time you talked about keeping your life simple and uncomplicated. Every time you made it crystal clear that a child would ruin everything you'd built. Simone wiped her eyes roughly. I heard you, Marcus. At the museum gala, at that charity dinner in February, at your mother's birthday party. You made your position on children abundantly clear to anyone who would listen. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. He'd said those things, believed those things, had lived his entire adult life according to the principle that children were complications he didn't need. And now he was standing in a hallway, learning that he'd been a father for 8 years, and every certainty he'd built his life around was crumbling. What's his name? He asked quietly. What? His name. Our son's name. What is it? Simone hesitated, then said softly, Julian. Julian Marcus Clark. Marcus felt something crack in his chest. You gave him my name. Of course I did. He's your son. She moved closer, tentative, like approaching a wounded animal. Marcus, I know this is overwhelming. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But can we please sit down and talk about this like adults? Away from his door where he might hear? Marcus wanted to leave. Wanted to walk out of this townhouse and never come back. To pretend the last 20 minutes hadn't happened, but he couldn't. That boy behind the door was his son. Julian Marcus Clark was his flesh and blood, and regardless of how Marcus felt about Simone's deception, the child was innocent in all of this. Downstairs, he said. They went down to Simone's living room, a space Marcus had been in dozens of times, but now saw with new eyes. The throw pillows had superhero logos he'd thought were just quirky decoration. The bookshelf held children's books mixed in with medical texts. There were photographs on the mantel he'd never looked at closely, but now he moved toward them, drawn by a need to see this child he'd helped create. Julian at various ages smiled from silver frames. A newborn with Simone's nose and Marcus's eyes. A toddler covered in birthday cake. A kindergartner missing his front teeth. A recent school photo showing a serious boy in a button-down shirt. His hair cut short. His expression solemn. He looks like me, Marcus said, his voice catching. He looks like both of us. People in Atlanta used to comment on his eyes all the time, asking me who his father was. I'd just say he got them from a relative. Simone sat on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. Marcus, I need you to understand something. When I got pregnant, I was 25 years old, in the middle of medical school, with parents who'd already disowned me for choosing medicine over pharmaceuticals. Finding out I was going to have a baby from a one-night stand nearly destroyed me. But I made a choice to keep him, and I've never regretted it. Not once. Julian is the best thing that ever happened to me, but you told me you couldn't have children. You said pregnancy would be fatal. That's true. It is true. The pregnancy with Julian nearly killed me. I had complications, severe ones. Internal bleeding, preeclampsia, an emergency C-section at 32 weeks. He spent 6 weeks in the NICU, and I spent 2 weeks recovering from surgery. The doctors told me that another pregnancy could be fatal, that the damage to my uterus was too severe. So I wasn't lying about that. I can't have more children. But I do have one child. Julian. Marcus sank into a chair across from her, his head in his hands. I don't know how to process this. Any of this. I woke up this morning thinking I was engaged to a woman I understood, planning a wedding, building a future. Now I find out that future included a son I didn't know existed. I was going to tell you. After the wedding. After we were married and you couldn't just walk away without consequence. Simone's voice was steady now, resigned. I know how that sounds. I know it was manipulative. But I was desperate, Marcus. Julian has been asking about his father since he was 4 years old. Asking why he doesn't have a daddy like other kids. Why I'm always alone at school events. Why he can't have a father who plays catch with him or teaches him to ride a bike. I could have done those things, if you'd told me. Would you have? Honestly? If some woman you'd slept with once tracked you down and told you she was pregnant, would you have welcomed her with open arms? Would you have dropped everything to be a father? Simone met his eyes. Or would you have demanded a paternity test, accused her of trying to trap you, maybe offered her money to go away quietly? Marcus wanted to deny it, but he couldn't. 9 years ago, if a stranger had shown up claiming to be pregnant with his child, he would have done exactly what Simone described. He would have been suspicious, protective of his assets and his freedom. He might have paid child support if forced to, but he never would have been a real father. He wouldn't have known how. So, instead you waited until I fell in love with you, he said bitterly. Until I proposed. Until I was too invested to walk away. Yes. Simone didn't apologize. I waited until you knew me, until you could see that I wasn't some gold digger or opportunist. I waited until you loved me enough that maybe, just maybe, you could love him too. Was it manipulative? Yes. Was it calculated? Absolutely. But I've been Julian's mother for 8 years, Marcus, and my job is to protect him. Even if that means protecting him from his own father's prejudices. The truth of that hit Marcus like cold water. He'd spent years proudly declaring that he didn't date single mothers, never examining what that said about him, never considering that those single mothers were people with stories, with reasons, with children who deserved fathers who chose them. He'd reduced an entire category of women to complications, obstacles to the uncomplicated life he wanted. And now he was the father of a child who'd grown up without him. I want to meet him, Marcus said. Properly. Not as your friend who showed up unexpectedly, but as his father. Simone's eyes widened. Are you sure? We don't have to do this tonight. You could take time to process everything. I've already missed 8 years. I don't want to miss another day. Marcus stood, his decision made. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for him. For Julian. He deserves a father who chooses him, who wants him, regardless of the circumstances of his conception. Marcus, I'm not saying I forgive you. I don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What you did was wrong, and you know it. But Julian didn't do anything wrong. He's an innocent kid who's been asking about his father, and now his father is here. Marcus moved toward the stairs. So I'm going to go up there and meet my son. And then you and I are going to figure out how to make this work. Because like it or not, we're connected now. Not just as a couple, but as parents. Simone followed him upstairs, her hand hovering near his elbow as if afraid he might bolt. They stopped outside Julian's door, and Marcus could hear the quiet clicks of Legos being assembled inside. His hand shook as he raised them to knock, and Simone covered them with her own. Thank you, she whispered, for giving him a chance. For giving us a chance. Marcus didn't respond. He knocked, and a small voice called, Come in. Julian sat on the floor surrounded by an elaborate Lego creation, a spaceship of some kind with multiple levels and detailed components. He looked up as they entered, his blue-green eyes cautious. Is the fighting over? We weren't fighting, Simone said, sitting on the bed. We were just talking about some adult things. It sounded like fighting. Julian returned to his Legos, but Marcus could see the tension in his small shoulders. Grandma says adults talk loud when they're mad at each other. Marcus lowered himself to the floor, his expensive suit probably ruining on the carpet, but he didn't care. Eye level with Julian felt important. You're right. We were fighting, and I'm sorry you heard that. But we're done now. I wanted to talk to you about something important. Julian's hand stilled on the Lego pieces. Are you going to make Mommy go away? Because if you are, I don't want to talk to you. The fierce protectiveness in that young voice made Marcus's throat tight. This 8-year-old boy was ready to defend his mother against a grown man twice his size. No, I'm not going to make your mommy go away. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about your daddy. I don't have a daddy. Julian's voice was matter of fact, but there was hurt underneath. Mommy says my daddy didn't know about me and that's why he's not here. That's true. He didn't know. But he knows now. Marcus glanced at Simone, who nodded encouragingly. Julian, I'm your father. I'm your daddy. The Lego spaceship clattered to the floor. Julian stared at Marcus, his eyes enormous, his mouth slightly open. You are? I am. I know this is probably confusing and maybe scary, but it's true. Your mom and I met a long time ago, before you were born, and then we lost touch. I didn't know about you until tonight, but now that I do, I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. Julian looked at his mother. Mommy? Is he really my daddy? Yes, baby. He really is. See how you have the same eyes? Julian scrambled to his feet and ran to Simone's dresser, where there was a mirror. He stared at his reflection, then back at Marcus, comparing. We do have the same eyes. And the same chin. Mommy said I got my chin from my daddy's side of the family. You did. Marcus couldn't help smiling, despite everything. My father has that same chin. Your grandfather. I have a grandfather? Julian's voice rose with excitement. Do I have grandparents? And aunts and uncles and cousins? You have a grandmother in Boston. My mother. Her name is Patricia. And you have a grandfather too, though he lives in Florida now. No aunts or uncles, I'm afraid. I'm an only child. But yes, you have family. Julian processed this information with visible intensity, his young face serious. Then he asked the question that broke Marcus's heart. Does this mean you're going to stay? Or are you going to leave like daddies on TV sometimes do? Marcus reached out slowly, giving Julian time to pull away if he wanted. When the boy didn't move, Marcus placed his hand on Julian's shoulder. I'm going to stay. I can't promise I'll be perfect at being a daddy because I've never done it before. But I promise I'm going to try, and I promise I'm not going to leave. Even though you just found out about me tonight. Even though I just found out about you tonight. Sometimes the best things in life are surprises. Julian studied him for a long moment, then launched himself at Marcus, small arms wrapping around his neck in a fierce hug. Marcus caught him instinctively, holding this child who was half him, half Simone, entirely his own person. Julian smelled like children's shampoo and Legos and something indefinable that Marcus recognized from nowhere except maybe genetic memory. I always wanted a daddy, Julian whispered into Marcus's shoulder. I asked Santa for one every year. Marcus held his son tighter, aware of Simone crying quietly on the bed, aware that his own eyes were wet. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get here. But I'm here now. They stayed like that for several minutes before Julian pulled back, suddenly businesslike. Do you like Legos? Because I'm building a space station and I could use help with the engineering. I love Legos, Marcus said, though he hadn't touched them since he was Julian's age. Show me what you're working on. They spent the next 2 hours on the floor building Legos together. Julian chattered constantly, telling Marcus about school and his friends, about the science project he was working on about the solar system, about how he wanted to be either an astronaut or a doctor when he grew up. Marcus listened, absorbing every detail, building a picture of this boy who was his son. Simone watched from the bed, occasionally joining the conversation but mostly letting them bond. When Julian's yawns became too frequent to ignore, she announced bedtime. Do you have to go? Julian asked Marcus, his small hand gripping Marcus's arm. Can you come back tomorrow? I'll come back tomorrow, Marcus promised. And the day after that. And the day after that. Every day? Every day that you want me here. Julian hugged him again, then let Simone lead him to brush his teeth. Marcus stood in the bedroom, looking at the space his son inhabited. Drawings covered one wall, mostly spaceships and planets. A bookshelf held chapter books about kids solving mysteries. A stuffed dinosaur sat on the pillow, clearly well-loved, despite Julian's attempts to seem too old for stuffed animals. Simone returned and began the bedtime routine, reading from a book about a boy wizard. Marcus stood in the doorway watching, This was a ritual they'd performed hundreds of times without him, a domestic intimacy he'd missed. When Simone finished the chapter and tucked Julian in, the boy called out, "Marcus, will you kiss me goodnight? That's what daddies do on TV." Marcus crossed to the bed and pressed a kiss to Julian's forehead, the gesture both foreign and somehow natural. "Good night, Julian. Sleep well." "Night, Daddy." The word hit Marcus with unexpected force. Daddy. He was someone's daddy. This smart, sweet Lego-building boy called him Daddy. He and Simone left the room, closing the door softly behind them. They went back downstairs in silence, the weight of the evening settling over them. In the living room, surrounded by evidence of the child Marcus hadn't known existed, they faced each other. "What happens now?" Simone asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I'm still angry at you. Still hurt. Still trying to process the fact that my entire life just changed in the space of a few hours. But I meant what I said upstairs. Julian deserves a father. Deserves better than growing up wondering why his dad didn't want him. So we call off the wedding?" Marcus sank onto the couch. "I don't know. Maybe. I can't think about that right now. All I can think about is that boy upstairs and how much of his life I've already missed." Simone sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry. You're right that I should have told you sooner. But I was terrified, Marcus. Terrified that you'd reject him, reject us. And I couldn't bear the thought of seeing that rejection in your eyes, of having to tell Julian that his father didn't want him. You didn't give me the chance to want him. You made the decision for me. I know. And that was wrong." Simone twisted her engagement ring around her finger. "So what do we do? Do you want this back?" Marcus looked at the ring, at the symbol of promises made under false pretenses. Part of him wanted to say yes, wanted to end their engagement and walk away from Simone and her lies. But that would mean walking away from Julian too, and he'd already promised his son he wouldn't leave. "Keep it for now," he said finally. "But we're not getting married in October. We're not getting married until I figure out if I can trust you again. If I can forgive you. That's fair. I want to see Julian. Every day, like I promised him. I want to be part of his life, part of his routine. I want to take him to school and help with homework and attend soccer games or whatever activities he does. He takes piano lessons on Tuesdays and has coding club on Thursdays," Simone said. "And he loves when I take him to the Science Museum on Saturdays. Then I'll take him to the Science Museum on Saturdays. And coding club. And piano lessons." Marcus rubbed his face, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "We need to tell my mother. And your parents. And figure out the legal stuff, custody agreements and child support and—" "I don't want your money, Marcus. I never have. My parents forgave me when Julian was born, and they've been helping financially. I'm a pediatric cardiologist at a major hospital. We're comfortable. He's my son. I'm going to support him. That's not negotiable." Marcus stood, needing to leave before he said something he'd regret. "I should go. It's late, and I need time to think." Simone walked him to the door. They stood in the entryway, the space between them filled with everything unsaid. "I do love you," she said quietly. "That wasn't fake. My feelings for you are real. I loved you too. Love you. I don't know. I can't think about us right now. I can only think about him. He's a good kid, Marcus. The best. You're going to love being his father." "I already do," Marcus realized as he said it. Despite everything, despite the shock and anger and betrayal, he already loved that boy upstairs who called him Daddy and wanted help building Lego spaceships. He left Simone's townhouse and sat in his car for a long time, watching the windows. A light was still on in Julian's room. His son's room. His son who existed, who was real, who wanted him there. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "How was your evening with Simone?" Patricia had no idea how that question would be answered. No idea that her world was about to change too. Instead of responding, Marcus called her. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, is everything all right?" It's late. Mother, I need to tell you something. You might want to sit down. Over the next 30 minutes, Marcus explained everything. His mother listened in increasingly shocked silence, occasionally gasping or murmuring disbelief. When he finished, she was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. Mother? I'm here. I'm just processing. You have a son. I have a grandson. Her voice cracked. Marcus, why didn't she tell you sooner? Why didn't she tell me when we first met? She was scared I'd reject them. And honestly, she was probably right. If she'd told me at the museum gala that she had a child, I never would have given her a chance. You know how I felt about dating single mothers. But to deceive you like that, I know, but I can't focus on that right now. Right now I need to focus on Julian, on being the father he deserves. Marcus watched the light in Julian's window finally go dark. Will you meet him? Your grandson? Patricia's voice softened. Of course. I'd love to meet him. When? I'll arrange something. Maybe this weekend. I don't want to overwhelm him, but he was excited about having grandparents. I'll call the club tomorrow and cancel those wedding venue meetings we had scheduled. Thank you. And Mother, please don't tell anyone yet. I want to figure out what Simone and I are doing before it becomes society gossip. After hanging up with his mother, Marcus drove home. His penthouse felt emptier than usual, the carefully curated bachelor space suddenly seeming sterile and cold. He'd lived here for 6 years, proud of the minimalist aesthetic, the lack of clutter or mess. But Julian's bedroom had been warm, lived in, full of personality and imagination. That night, Marcus lay in bed unable to sleep, his mind racing with images of Julian's face, his blue-green eyes, his shy smile. This morning, Marcus had been a man with no children and no plans to have any. Tonight, he was a father, and everything he thought he knew about himself had shifted. The next morning, Marcus called his lawyer. I need you to draw up some documents. Child support, custody arrangements, college fund establishment, everything a parent would need for a newly acknowledged child. You have a child? I just found out yesterday it's complicated. Can you have something ready by Monday? I'll try. Marcus, do you want me to arrange for a paternity test? Marcus thought about Julian's eyes, his chin, the way he concentrated on his Legos with the same intensity Marcus brought to engineering problems. No. He's mine. I don't need a test to tell me what I already know. He spent the day at the office, unable to focus on work. His assistant noticed but didn't comment, redirecting calls and rescheduling meetings without question. Around 3 o'clock, Marcus sent Simone a text. What time does Julian get home from school? She responded immediately. 4:15. Will you be here? Yes. Marcus left the office early, stopping at a toy store on the way. He wandered the aisles, overwhelmed by choices. What did 8-year-old boys like? He settled on an advanced Lego set, a science kit for building simple robots, and a book about astronomy. At the register, he added a stuffed rocket ship, then immediately felt foolish. Was Julian too old for stuffed animals? My nephew loves these, the cashier said kindly, noticing his hesitation. He's 9 and sleeps with 3 of them. Marcus bought the rocket. He arrived at Simone's townhouse at 4:10. She opened the door looking exhausted, still in her scrubs from the hospital. You came. I said I would. She let him in, and they sat in tense silence waiting for Julian. When the door finally opened and Julian bounded in with a backpack covered in space stickers, his face lit up when he saw Marcus. You're here. You really came back. I promised I would. Marcus held out the shopping bag. I brought you some things. Julian's eyes went wide as he unpacked the gifts. These are so cool. Look, Mom, it's the Millennium Falcon Lego set, and a robot kit, and... He pulled out the stuffed rocket ship, then tried to hide it behind his back. I'm probably too old for stuffed animals. I don't know about that, Marcus said. I slept with a teddy bear until I was 12. Really? Really. His name was Professor Snuggles. Julian giggled, then added the rocket to the pile of gifts. Thank you, Daddy. There was that word again. Natural as breathing for Julian, but still catching Marcus off guard every time. They spent the afternoon together, Marcus helping with homework and learning about Julian's life. He met Julian's friends via video chat, sat through an enthusiastic presentation about black holes, and learned that his son was vegetarian because he'd read a book about factory farming and declared he couldn't eat anything with a face. When Simone called them for dinner, a simple pasta dish she'd thrown together, the three of them sat at the table like a family. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. The conversation flowed easily, Julian dominating with stories about school, Simone adding commentary, Marcus learning to navigate this new dynamic. After dinner, Marcus stayed for bedtime again. This time, when Simone offered him the book, he read the chapter, stumbling over character names but getting through it. Julian listened with rapt attention, and when Marcus finished, his son said, "You read good, Daddy. Will you read tomorrow too?" "I'll read tomorrow too." Days turned into weeks. Marcus rearranged his entire life around being Julian's father. He attended piano recitals and coding club exhibitions. He took Julian to the Science Museum every Saturday, learning alongside his son about planets and dinosaurs and the physics of roller coasters. He had dinner with Julian and Simone 5 nights a week, slowly rebuilding trust with Simone while building a relationship with his son. His mother met Julian on a Sunday afternoon at Marcus's penthouse. Patricia had arrived with 3 shopping bags full of gifts and spent the first 10 minutes crying and hugging her grandson. Julian, overwhelmed but pleased, showed her his Lego creations and told her about school. By the end of the visit, Patricia was already planning to take Julian to her book club, convinced the ladies would adore him. Marcus's friends were less enthused. Jeremy, in particular, was skeptical. "She trapped you, man. She deliberately hid your kid from you to lock you down." "Maybe," Marcus admitted over their weekly scotch. "But Julian didn't trap me. He's just a kid who needed a father, and I'm trying to be that father. Are you still going to marry her?" "I don't know. Some days I think maybe we can work through it. Other days I'm so angry I can barely look at her. But Julian loves her, and she's been a good mother to him. I have to respect that." The truth was, Marcus's feelings about Simone were complicated. He was still hurt by her deception, still angry that she'd made the choice for him. But he also saw how hard she'd worked to raise Julian alone, saw the sacrifices she'd made. And sometimes, when they were reading to Julian together or laughing at something their son had said, he remembered why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. It was September, 3 months after discovering Julian's existence, when everything came to a head. Marcus had taken Julian to a Red Sox game, just the two of them, a father-son afternoon. Julian had been so excited he'd barely slept the night before, and Marcus had indulged his son with hot dogs and cotton candy and all the ballpark food Simone usually limited. They were walking back to Marcus's car when Julian suddenly said, "Are you and Mommy going to get married?" Marcus fumbled his keys. "What makes you ask that? Mommy still wears the ring. But you don't live with us. And you never kiss her or hold her hand like you used to. Did you stop loving her because of me?" "No." Marcus knelt down so he was eye level with Julian. "Nothing that happened is because of you. You understand that, right? I'm not upset that you exist. I'm so glad you exist. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me." "Then why are you and Mommy sad all the time?" Marcus struggled to find words an 8-year-old would understand. "Your mom and I are working through some grown-up problems. It's complicated." "Is it because she didn't tell you about me sooner?" "How do you know about that?" Julian shrugged, too wise for his age. "I hear things. And I'm smart. I figured it out. Mommy said you didn't know about me. But then you suddenly showed up, so she must have just told you. That's why you were fighting that first night." Marcus pulled Julian into a hug. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that." "Grandma Patricia says I get that from you." Julian pulled back. "Daddy, I don't want you and Mommy to not get married because of me. I want us to be a real family. We are a real family. Marriage or no marriage, we're a family. You, me, and your mom. But it would be better if you lived with us. Then I could see you every morning, and we could have breakfast together, and you'd be there when I wake up from bad dreams. Marcus's throat tightened. You have bad dreams? Sometimes. About you leaving and not coming back. Mommy says you won't, but in my dreams, you get in your car and drive away, and I never see you again. Oh, buddy. Marcus held his son close. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. No matter what happens with me and your mom, I'm always going to be your father. I'm always going to be here. That night, after dropping Julian off, Marcus asked Simone if they could talk. They sat in her living room, tea growing cold between them, and Marcus finally asked the question that had been haunting him for months. Do you love me? Really love me? Or was I just convenient? The father of your child who happened to show up in your life again. Simone met his eyes, and hers were filled with tears. I fell in love with you that night in Atlanta 9 years ago. I spent months looking for you, hoping I'd find you again. When your mother introduced us at the gala, I couldn't believe it. The man I'd been searching for was standing right in front of me. And then, when we started dating, and I realized you were everything I'd imagined and more, I fell in love with you all over again. But you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. No, and that was wrong. I should have trusted that the man who was gentle and kind, who cooked me dinner and read to our son, who promised to be there every day, would have understood. But I was scared, Marcus. I'd been rejected so many times. By my parents initially, by the father of my child who I could never find, by society every time someone looked at me with judgment for being a single mother. I couldn't face being rejected by you too. I'm not going to reject you, Marcus said quietly. Or Julian. I've been angry and hurt, and I've needed time to process everything. But I haven't stopped loving you. Even when I wanted to, I couldn't. Simone's breath caught. Does that mean... It means I want to try. Really try. Not just as Julian's parents, but as partners. As a couple. Marcus moved closer to her on the couch. But we need to start over. No more secrets. No more lies, even by omission. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. No more secrets, Simone promised. I'll tell you everything. And she did. Over the following weeks, Simone told Marcus everything about Julian's early years. The difficult pregnancy, the terrifying premature birth, the weeks in the NICU, her parents' eventual forgiveness and support, the daycare disasters and babysitter nightmares, Julian's first steps, his first words, his first day of school, the birthday parties and sick days and ordinary moments that Marcus had missed. Marcus listened to it all, grieving the time he'd lost while grateful for the time he now had. He told Simone about his own childhood, his difficult relationship with his father, his fear of repeating those mistakes. They talked for hours every night after Julian went to bed, rebuilding trust word by word, story by story. In October, Marcus moved into the townhouse. Julian had been ecstatic, immediately dragging Marcus upstairs to show him which closet he could use and which drawer in the bathroom. Simone had watched from the doorway, her eyes bright with happy tears. That first morning, waking up in the townhouse, Marcus was awakened by small feet running down the hallway. Julian burst into the bedroom, launching himself onto the bed between Marcus and Simone. You're still here. I thought maybe I dreamed it. I'm still here, Marcus promised, tickled by Julian's enthusiasm. I told you I wasn't going anywhere. Can we make pancakes? Mommy makes the best pancakes on Saturdays. They made pancakes together. The three of them crowded into Simone's galley kitchen. Marcus was terrible at flipping them, and Julian thought it was hilarious, and Simone laughed harder than Marcus had heard her laugh in months. They ate breakfast together at the small table, Julian chattering about his plans for the day, Marcus and Simone exchanging glances over his head that said everything they couldn't say in front of their son. Later, after Julian had gone to play in his room, Marcus found Simone in the kitchen cleaning up. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her against him. I want to get married, he said into her hair. Not in October like we originally planned, but soon. Maybe at Christmas, at the villa like we talked about with Julian there to see it. Simone turned in his arms. Are you sure? We don't have to rush, I'm sure. I want Julian to grow up seeing his parents married, seeing what commitment looks like. And I want to be your husband. Really your husband, with all the complications and mess and everything that comes with it. I want that too. Simone kissed him, slow and sweet. I love you, Marcus Whitmore. I love you too, Dr. Clark. Soon to be Dr. Whitmore Clark. Hyphenated? Absolutely. You earned that name. You should keep it. They were married on Christmas Eve at the villa in Turks and Caicos. Both sets of grandparents attended, along with Marcus's closest friends and Simone's medical school roommates. Julian served as ring bearer, taking his job with utmost seriousness, and when the officiant pronounced them married, their son cheered louder than anyone. That night, after Julian had fallen asleep in the villa's guest room, exhausted from playing in the ocean and eating too much cake, Marcus and Simone stood on the terrace where he'd proposed months earlier. The ocean murmured against the shore, and stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. I can't believe we're here, Simone said. After everything, I can't believe we made it. We made it because of Julian. Because he deserved parents who chose each other, chose him, chose this family. Marcus pulled his wife close. I used to think I didn't want children because they were complicated. But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of repeating my father's mistakes. Julian taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day and trying. He's a pretty great teacher. He gets that from his mother. They stood together under the Caribbean stars, listening to the ocean, thinking about the son sleeping inside who had brought them together in the most unexpected way. Marcus had spent years declaring he didn't date single mothers, building walls around his heart, protecting himself from anything messy or complicated. But love, he'd learned, wasn't meant to be simple. It was meant to be real, full of surprises and second chances, full of 8-year-old boys with blue-green eyes and mothers fierce enough to protect their children even when it meant risking their own happiness. It was worth every complication, every challenge, every moment of fear. Inside the villa, Julian stirred in his sleep and called out softly, "Daddy." Marcus and Simone went to him together. This family they'd built from one night 9 years ago, from hidden secrets and hard truths, from love that refused to give up even when it should have been easier to walk away. Marcus sat on the edge of Julian's bed, smoothing his son's hair while Simone stood in the doorway. "I'm here, buddy. Just a bad dream. Go back to sleep. You won't leave? I won't leave. I promise. I'll be right here when you wake up." Julian nodded, already drifting back into sleep, secure in the knowledge that his father would be there in the morning. Marcus stayed until Julian's breathing evened out, then joined Simone in the hallway. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing us, for choosing him. Thank you for fighting for him, for being brave enough to risk everything so he could have his father." Marcus kissed her softly. "Now let's go to bed, Mrs. Whitmore Clark. We have a whole lifetime of messy, complicated, beautiful family moments ahead of us." And they did. Every morning brought Julian's laughter and endless questions. Every evening brought family dinners and homework help and bedtime stories. Every day brought them closer. This unlikely family built from secrets and second chances. Marcus never again said he didn't date single mothers. Instead, when asked about his family, he smiled and said he'd married the only woman brave enough to give him what he'd been missing all along, even when he'd been too afraid to know he wanted it. A son, a wife, a home, a family,